Hi everyone, Darren Hunter here, and I'm with Michael Sands from Teams by Design. This is the Outsourcing PM podcast show where we talk all about how to unbusy and unshackle your property management team. And so we can then get virtual assistance on how to do all of that never-ending admin, swamp work, grind work, whatever you want to call it, so your team members can focus on high-value, dollar-productive customer service growth activities and really strengthen and grow your rent roll. So Michael, today we're talking about, we've already covered in our last podcast, the two biggest objections people have towards virtual assistants is task accuracy and how much time it takes to train someone. Let's now talk about the next three main objectives people have, which is concerns about English skills, concerns about a VA working in a completely different time zone than your team, and of course that we only employ local, we won't be outsourcing jobs overseas, so we can talk about that too. Let's talk about English skills, Michael, we're dealing mainly, our clients are in Western cultures, Australia, New Zealand, United Kingdom, and typically people think, okay, Filipinos, there's an accent, because we get phone calls, or did get a lot of phone calls from Filipinos, or we're calling up the phone company and we talk to a Filipino with their accent, and there's a sort of a stigma that's been created around hearing a person with an accent. How do you deal with what's your response to that?
Well, find me a country that doesn't have an accent, right? Like, when you're dealing with them. I think, yeah, it's a concern that people have, and it's a stigma that people have been sitting on. And I think it largely goes back to a lot of the telco and the banking companies that did outsource from a long time ago their calls abroad. And those calls, they were very transactional and they were lacking empathy. And also, like, they lacked problem solving typically because they had certain parameters that they could work within. The flexibility on how to problem solve wasn't in their scope. And I guess, we're all burnt by that stigma. Different countries too, right? Like, there are other countries out there that I wouldn't have on the phone when my team are calling out representing clients. I just wouldn't. And it's overcoming that stigma. But when you break it down, the Philippines has, like, English is their most spoken language. When you look at other countries that are on the phone, such as like India, it's not the most spoken language. Like, they've got a number of different dialects. And that's not saying the Philippines don't have a number of different dialects. English is the most spoken language, right? 110 million people. So that's a good place to start. I guess the other stigma there is accent. People are worried about accent. But I guess in Australia and the UK and New Zealand, it's so multicultural. People are really forgiving about accents because their neighbours have an accent. The shopkeepers have an accent. The people in their office have an accent. New Zealand has, like, a really high population.
I mean, New Zealand is one of the most multicultural countries I've seen, and so is the UK, and Australia is too, and even more so as the years go by, the more multicultural we're becoming.
And you know what, Darren? Philippines provide over 25% of all international nurses across the globe. So day in, day out, we're taught, like, this is a nation that we deal with every single day. So when you're speaking with a Filipino, it's not an issue. It's not even an issue. But, so we bring it back to accent, right? So when we go to recruit, Darren, we get voice files and video files, and we listen to clarity of accent. We listen to pronunciation.
Can we take a step back? Because when you guys are, Teams by Design is very aggressive with your recruiting in the Philippines, and there's always ads going, and you've also done events yourself with Dennis in the Philippines, teaching potential virtual assistants about Australia culture or Aussie slang or, property management, all of those sort of things. But as part of the interview process of them to submit an application, they've actually got to submit them talking as well on a video file, on a voice file, right?
Yeah, it's one of the things.
What do you do with that? What do you do with that?
Well, I used to close my eyes and listen to the audio files one by one, and listen. Is this a lovely, empathetic, sympathetic, problem-solving voice at the end of the phone, like a reassuring voice? And I've trained our team members, Darren, when we recruit, they now listen to that and they know what I like. So it's a good example of being able to train someone a skill that I thought I only had.
Yeah. I was talking with Paul from the UK. He's been with Teams by Design just 6 months now, and he's now about to recruit his third virtual assistant, which is actually going to be his executive assistant to manage his emails and manage his phone calls and manage his diary and all of those sort of things. And he's really excited. But he mentioned that when he employed his virtual assistants with Teams by Design, he actually had access to all of these voice recordings, so he could actually listen to them himself.
Yeah, correct. And all the calls that we make, we also record all the calls, so there's sample calls that people can listen to on what a real live phone call sounds like.
All right, now, Michael, back in the day when you owned a rent roll, you had 650 doors in Melbourne, spread across Metro Melbourne. You had a very big rent roll. You only had 1.5 staff employed on the ground, which is insane. So the rest, you had your big team of virtual assistants there. What were the typical voice-related tasks that you got them doing where they're speaking with your landlords and your tenants?
Well, I think taking a step back on that, we identified what are the type of calls that are coming into the office, right? What's important? What value do we put on it? And what is the outcome of the caller want? And a lot of like the tenants that were calling or tradespeople that were calling, there were simple questions that could be answered easily enough by trained executives. They didn't need me to get on the phone to kind of clarify how to log maintenance, or they didn't need me to clarify, where to pay their rent to, things like that. So by having like our tenant call, so inspection inquiry, the viewing inquiries, maintenance inquiries, anything that a tenant would have would come through, and one of my team members would pick that up and answer it and solve the problem on the spot, rather than having to wait for a message to call back, because property managers get busy. One thing though, majority of the owner calls were always managed in the office. That's not to say that a VA couldn't handle that, but our structure was that our PM, all they had to do was love the owner. In the end, just love the owner. Call them, update them, and rely on the team, working out the rent increases, the CMAs, managing the maintenance. The VA could email an owner, no problem there at all. But I just thought as part of our business, the idea was freeing up the time of the property managers so they could love the client. And that was what we gave our property managers to do. And the team did the grunt work. They did the time-intensive, hard lifting grunt work, the repetitious. I mean, Darren, how many times do we see on the chatter, oh my God, I just had someone ask me again, my light switch has gone off, or my hot water service is broken, or my toilet is running. The repetitious questions that you get asked, our team members handled that.
Wow. And just for everyone's sake, that we're talking a lot about property management tasks. They're actually up to 30 different hardcore, admin, grind work tasks that is keeping your team really, really busy right now. And you can see it's this never ending grind. If only you could free them from those tasks so they could focus on, servicing clients and growing the rent roll and just high value, dollar productive tasks. Just go to teamsbydesign.tasks.com. That's teamsbydesign.tasks.com. And on that page, you'll be able to download those 30 tasks that typically, now one of the biggest, Michael, just shifting back to you and what you do now, one of the biggest services that you do provide with virtual assistants is processing applications. And those tenancy applications are being processed by your team, which means phone calls to previous and current landlords, phone calls to previous, or I should say current agents, and lots of voice work. And you've made it work very successful. So tell us about that.
Yeah, we've made hundreds of thousands of phone calls now across Australia, New Zealand, and so on. And it's a case of confidence on the phone, being clear, knowing the questions to ask, listening to the pregnant pauses, right? So when Darren, you call someone, oh, what was Dennis like as a tenant? And they say, oh, yeah, they were okay, right? Someone that's inexperienced would say, okay, they were okay. But it's listening and then being able to ask that follow-up question. You sounded a little bit hesitant there, Darren. Can you dig further or elaborate more on Dennis? and then you'll open up a bit because you're kind of asking those questions. It's, you're not unique in an office to be able to pick up the BS detector on an application form. Yes, you may have been in the industry for a long, long time, but training someone how to listen to those pregnant pauses, looking at payslips, being able to understand if there's a question, and then bringing that to you so that you can then make a captain's call.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay, well, now let's just say you're dealing with a person who's considering a virtual assistant, and what we've said so far still doesn't resonate. They don't want any virtual assistants. They want them to do the admin work, but they don't want them to speak to tenants or landlords. In that case, what would you say to them?
Well, look, if you don't want them to speak to landlords, that's fine. I mean, the PM's role can do that. But if they know the parameters, and, we have an agency, and, they've advised the owners, hey, we have an admin support person. This is the step that's going to take. They'll process the application. They're going to give you a call and run through the application with you once they've had a meeting with me about it. If you have any questions, you can come back to us. But again, Darren, it depends on how the office is structured. Our team in office would speak to the owners, but more and more, that was 3 years ago now. I know so much more, and the quality and caliber of people out there internationally is superior. And when you're in an economy and in a market now when it is so hard to recruit people in an office or in Australia, it's almost impossible for people to get good staff right now.
Impossible, for sure.
Right. And even recruiters are struggling with this, like for in-office people around the country. This is a really good solution because you've got university educated people that are customer service focused. Like, this is a nation of customer service loving people. You can train them to speak to your owners, speak to your tenants.
But I guess at the end of the day, also, there are people out there, excellent admin people that understand English really well, but their spoken English isn't the best. Well, we can just keep them on admin tasks and non-voice related tasks, right?
Yeah, I mean, just because we're not happy with how someone might pronounce words to speak to a client and we don't put them on a phone to your client, speaking with you, Darren, that's fine. Right? Like, I would have no issue with 100% of them speaking with you. But for me, sometimes I listen to how they roll, pronunciation and so on. And maybe I'm a little bit harsh when I'm listening than I need to be. But so be it. It's working.
My marketing assistant, her English isn't the best. Like, she understands me well. She does her job really, really well, but I wouldn't get her on the phone talking to clients. And that works well. There's so many things that I can get her to do. So, that's not an issue.
English is a complicated language, right? We've got so many pronouns, different variations of words. And, we hear it with our team too. When you got like he and she, in some countries, like, they don't have that. In some dialects, they don't have that. It's not, the pronouns are different. So, no, they're lovely. I mean, like, how great are they?
Yeah, that's cool. Well, let's move on to the next one. I think we've covered the English skills area really, really thoroughly. Let's talk about now another objection that a person considering virtual assistants. Well, I'm in Eastern Australian time zone, or I'm in New Zealand, or I'm in the UK. That VA is going to be not working in our time zone. What do you say to that?
It's so accommodating. Like, the time zone that you're in, they're the hours that they will work. If it's the UK, that's fine. It means that they get to have all day doing their errands and family time, and then they're working in the afternoon to the evening. If you're in New Zealand, that's fine. They get up early, they finish early. So whatever your business hours are, they will work to.
Yeah. So certainly, it's just not an objection. The time zone is adjusted with the worker to yours. So
flexible. You'll get more complaints hiring someone local and opening the office an hour earlier or an hour later than you would hiring someone from the Philippines.
Yeah. All right. Well, the next one is well, you shouldn't be outsourcing jobs overseas. You really got to be supporting your country. I guess my first response, Michael, if I can have the first shot, is, well, if that's the case, when you go shopping, what's in your shopping cart? What's in your trolley? Is it all just produce and you're only supporting from your country, or are you not also practicing it there too? It's just really normal to have services and goods that are inside the country and outside the country. I
think too, though, I mean, those comments are made on the assumption that you put a job ad up and you're going to have, hundreds of qualified people knocking on your door to take that job, which isn't the case. And there are people out there that want the job, they want to work. I mean, again, we touched on recruiting at the moment is just a nightmare because people are wanting hyperinflated salaries. I mean, whether they're worth it or not, there are some people out there that genuinely are worth, inflated salaries. But then there's those that are asking for it and they just don't produce the quality of work that that the value, sits at. But yeah, there's just not enough people that are lining up. I mean, Darren, I would put a job ad up for a PM or like an assistant or something years ago. They're not there. So then we need to change our recruiting style to start recruiting people with no experience.
There's people out there, Michael, that still think that everybody in the office for all those jobs must be employed with someone local, and they have all this struggle. Now, yeah, the low admin tasks, we can get a person that's suited to property management that doesn't have the experience. But even as you said, the starting incomes are getting higher, the expectations are higher. But let's say we do overcome the near impossible. It's not quite totally impossible, but overcome the near impossible and get the right person. Well, then what are all of the issues in the way of keeping that person for 2 or 3 or 4 years? What's now against us? We've got recruiters out there that are actively headhunting. We've got other real estate bosses that are having a near impossible situation, finding it's easier just to call that experienced prop manager down the road and throw them an extra $5,000 a year or whatever. It's just getting so hard out there. Would you agree? Yeah,
I mean, we're seeing agencies out there do sign-on bonuses to inexperienced property managers to come on now. I mean, it's ridiculous. And the way COVID has kind of come in and made changes to how people work and better efficiencies, offices, they're going to struggle unless they can find ways to, increase their fees, right? Which is one way, because when people are asking for increased wages and their fees are low, they won't be in operation for much longer. And that PM would have, had a bit of a windfall while the office was still trading.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I had a situation a number of years ago. I was at a national conference and the topic came up with a crowd open forum discussion about virtual assistants right back in the day when it was new and only a few people were doing it. And a lady got up in front of everybody and said, "This is wrong." Everyone in the room, you could hear a pin drop. Everyone in the room was just frozen. She said, "This is wrong. What you're saying on stage," and whoever the speaker was at the time, "is wrong. Jobs should not be outsourced out of the country. We must be supporting our economy." And the crazy thing is, I know that lady, you know that lady, all right? And within 12 months, now she was based in a rent roll in a city in Australia that is got the highest rates of transition, the highest rates of staff turnover, bar none, because the whole city is a turnover city. And she couldn't even get bad experienced property managers, like shocking ones. She got zero. And that forced her to rethink her stance, rethink her opinion. And she then became the most outsourced business. They were getting up to 90% of their tasks done by trained virtual assistants in the Philippines. In fact, she even sponsored one to come over, put them on a plane flight, and they could sit in their department for a few weeks. They provide them accommodation, kept them fed, and train them up that way to become property managers. Now, I'm not telling people to go and do that, but Michael, I think you're right. We've got to rethink the model. You keep on doing what you're doing, you're just going to get more frustrated with this impossible recruitment situation. And there's, how many of the tasks, let's say you had 100 tasks to do that would normally be done on the ground in the office. Is it 80% or 70% or 90% that you now believe could be successfully outsourced?
Yeah, it's about 80%. I mean, one thing we're not mentioning is all that time wasted in an office. Like when someone is in an office, there's, the water cooler speak, there's just, out of that 8 hours of work, there's probably 2 to 3 hours of actual efficient time. So you're not really maxing out what you should be doing. I think a lot of people could do, and I'll probably be crucified for this, but a lot of people could do what they're doing in 8 hours in half that time.
Yeah. So a great model out there is just first, certainly unbusy your team for all those tasks. Go to teamsbydesigntasks.com, download the list of the different tasks that you can possibly do, but consider what tasks can only be done on the ground, location-based, period. And then what can you possibly do with the other tasks there with outsourcing? Now, Michael, at this point, people, inviting people to have a chat with you, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, the best way would be to go to teamsbydesign.com and then just to contact us, drop in your name and number, and we'll give you a call back right away. I drop our phone number, but I don't want everyone calling at the one time. I want to be able to speak to everyone and give them the time of the day.
Yeah, well done. So good discussion there. I think we've covered those 5 objections really well in this podcast and the last one as well. So the other one, again, we're talking about people with concerns about task accuracy and how much time it takes to get the training done with a virtual assistant. Today, we've talked about English skills, time zone issues, and of course, employing local. So Michael, some good information there, and everyone out there, virtual assistants will unshackle, unbusy your team, get them away from that grind work. And so you can focus on those high value, dollar productive, customer service, business strengthening, rent roll growth activities. So Michael, great podcast. And thanks everyone.
See you later, everyone.